Today is April 24th, 2012, and we are interviewing Bill Buechsenschuetz at the Illinois State Library. Bill is 72 years old, having been born on October 21st, 1939. My name is Brian Tober, and I'll be doing the interview. Bill, for the record, could you state what branch of service and which war you served in?
I was in the Army, United States Army, and in Vietnam.
And what was your rank?
When I was in Vietnam, I was a lieutenant, first lieutenant. I retired as a lieutenant colonel.
And where did you serve? I mean, in Vietnam.
In
and
Vietnam.
Where else, I guess?
Well, our base camp was at Cu Chi, which is outside of, it's quite a ways outside of Saigon. We operated Tay Ninh, Dao Tiang, and then went down and opened up the Delta when we moved into the Delta.
And what was your job or assignment in the Army?
The first 6 months of Vietnam, I was a platoon leader, rifle platoon leader, and then the last 6 months, I was the company exec officer. Throughout my whole career, excuse me, I started out down at Fort Leonard Wood as a training officer. Actually, I started out enlisted.
As what?
I started out as an enlisted and went to OCS, but spent a little over a year in Germany with the 7th Cavalry.
And where were you at in Germany?
Schweinfurt. And after I came back, I went back to Fort Leonard Wood for a while, and then I went off active duty, and I stayed in the reserve system and retired from there.
Okay. And when you're in Vietnam, were there many casualties in your unit?
I would tell you that I was very fortunate in my platoon. I never lost anybody.
Wow.
Several people wounded, but I never lost anyone. And a lot of close ones.
Yeah.
Big problem was snipers.
Where it was.
Yeah. It was where we were operating was open area, much like just walking through a cornfield, or a bean field, where they see you for a long distance.
Right.
And they tended to look for the radio operator, and then very simply count one ahead of you, and that was who they went after. So, yeah.
Could you tell us about a couple of your more memorable experiences?
Well, there was probably one time down in the Delta where we were walking, and walking down a rice dike, and the sniper opened up on us, and he was going for me because I was the one in front. He put it past my left ear, out of which I have lost considerable hearing. Put it past the right ear of my RTO, who was about 10 feet behind me, and he's lost hearing in his right ear, and put a nasty rug burn across the chest of an NCO that was about another 25 yards behind me. Didn't really hurt him, just creased him. I always thought that sniper was probably the most unlucky guy in the
Wow.
country. Yeah, if he had decided to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
They always shot for your head because they wanted to send you home where your mother couldn't see you.
Yeah.
And but if he'd have lowered his point of aim a little bit, why, he'd have made it.
Wow.
It was kind of, I say, kind of funny, but that he had 3 of us lined up, and he had to put it between all 3 of us within an inch or 2.
Wow. And that affected your hearing, you think?
Yeah, right now
to
my hearing aid's not working, but I wear a hearing aid in my left ear. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of things happened. You know, that's
Yeah.
you know,
If you want to share any other experiences, I mean.
well, I don't know. I would say I have a real prejudice right now against reporters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I found, which rarely ever happened, that you were identified in the newspapers back home. But this guy did. And he wrote an article about me. Not by name, but when he identified the unit and everything, no question who he was talking about. And it was, I guess, what revealed to me was the jaundice that they wrote, how they wrote, because it bore no resemblance as to what happened that
And this
day.
was written during the war then?
Yeah. He left out the important things and added a little bit to the things that to turn them so that they were wrong. But and it was published, it was syndicated throughout the country.
It was a local reporter then, or is it?
No,
Oh, okay,
it was on a national scale.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on a national scale. Somebody saw it, identified the unit, mailed it to my company commander. My company commander came down and handed it to me and said, "This is one of your friends." And I told him that never ever send another reporter out with me because I couldn't guarantee safety.
Yeah.
No, it's there's all kinds of things that happen, but it's I don't know.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I'm a Bronze Star.
Bronze Star.
Yeah.
Can you share any of your battle planning with us?
Battle planning? Well, really everything was done pretty much on a routine basis. You flew to a spot somewhere, and depending on how long you're going to be gone, we were usually flown out, landed, and we would spend 2 or 3 days moving through an area that you're just trying to search and it's kind of they call it search and destroy, and you're looking for anything in the houses. You do a search of homes, you do a search of anything that comes along, and you watch for the people. That story that I was telling you about, I sent a squad out and they recovered 4 people, 2 women and 2 men. And you always detain men who would fall between the age groups of about 16 to 50, somewhere in there. People you might consider of military age or capability, and if they didn't have an ID. And anyway, yeah, and just to kind of relate what happened, that 2 of the 2 guys turned out to be VC. And I had already picked one up on the LZ when I landed. This poor guy was walking along, and all of a sudden we landed beside him, and he fell into our perimeter. So we held on to him until we got the police out there, National Police. They came out and checked him out, and he had a whole lot more money on him than the average Vietnamese would normally have, a very large roll of bills. Turned out he was a paymaster for the local VC units. And so obviously we detained him. And but the other 2 ended up 2 later on. What really set the thing off was that the 2 women didn't have ID cards. For us, it was very difficult to look at a Vietnamese and say, how old are they? Well, the older woman was too old, did not need it. Once she was old enough, she didn't have to have an ID card anymore. The younger one was a young lady who was too young. She was not quite 16 when you had to have an ID card. but we retained both of them for that, or detained both of them and brought them in for that reason. The girl had stepped on something. The VC used to plant things in the nails, and boards and so on on the rice paddies. And she apparently had stepped on one. She was about to lose a foot due to infection. And we kept them overnight and shipped her back to our medics. And she had probably the first time she'd seen a doctor in her life. Wow. And they cleaned up her foot, gave her tetanus shots and antibiotics and so on. And we let the two women go, obviously. But all four of them, everybody in my platoon dug into their C rations for the night to feed all four of them.
So then would you go back to base camp every time, or would they just take you from one spot to the next, or would you always return? Or
yeah, you always went back to a base camp somewhere. Yeah. When we at Coochie, we had a very large base camp. That was the division base camp. But normally what you did is you went out, established a fire base somewhere, and if you could, you brought artillery in there, and then from there you moved out in the surrounding area, and you just went out and looked for, on occasion, and I found out on occasion why we you were bait. Take a small unit and send it out somewhere, and see if the VC or the NVA would take the bait and attack you, and then you hope that the support that you were supposed to get, you were going to get. This usually happens at night. Oh. so yeah, I mean that was usually the times that things were the tightest, was when you got shot, sent out like that, and you just waited to see if somebody was going to come along, and because you knew if they came at you, they were going to come at you with more than what you had, and that was the whole idea. Right. Was that you went out there with a small enough force that it looked like an enticing target, and so yeah, and that was probably the thing I didn't like the most.
Yeah, and you knew when this was happening. After a while, probably you.
Most times, yeah, you finally figured it out that that's what you were doing, and I mean the worst time was they pulled me in and resupplied real quick. Got back on helicopters, and see, we were down in the Delta. There was no support down there. The support was all ours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nobody could reach us, and with artillery or anything like that, it had to be the Air Force with gunships or something. And they told me they were sending me out where we knew there had been a regiment running around, and I was going to be a very enticing target. My platoon normally would have been 40 people, and I was down to about 24. Yeah, like I said, we were going to be a very enticing target.
So was all your transportation with helicopters and then on foot, or?
Yeah, you went out. You flew out wherever, and then from that point on, you were on your own. You were walking. Yeah, and yeah, it was. Like I said, you just went out and started walking, and that's why the snipers were no good. Because they could see you coming for some distance. Got to the point where I called my platoon sergeants in one day, or my squad sergeants, squad leaders in, and said we were going to change the operation a little bit. And I said, come on in, and I laid my map on the ground. I said, get up here and take a look at it. I want to show you what we're going to do. And they said, no, sir, we're just going to stand off over here. We don't want to get any closer to you than this. So, yeah, and they did. They did not get. They wouldn't get close to me. So.
During your time there, can you tell us about staying in touch with family? Were you able to stay in touch with family while you were there?
Yeah, you could. I don't know that I did a particularly good job of me staying in touch with them. But the real problem was that when you went out, you didn't carry any more with you than you just absolutely had to. And you didn't get mail, and you didn't mail anything. And we did not take mail out with us, simply because if something happened to somebody, we did not want home addresses and that sort of thing falling in anybody's hands, or you just inadvertently dropping it because they were, it found its way back into the United States, and let's face it, the people back here were not that supportive of what was going on. So, and they would potentially harass your family if they knew who you were or where you were. It was, tell you, there was one I think, if we're recording it like this, one thing that I, in that relationship to people back here supporting you, the battalion was at a forward fire base, and this was after I was an company exec officer anyway, and we sent out patrols, and one night, and they were ambush patrols. One night they ambushed another VC patrol coming through, and they killed about 3 or 4 of the VC. And what you normally did is they took the bodies up and laid them close to the road where the family could find them, because most of these people were usually locals. And about 2 days later, this little old man walked into this forward fire base and wanted to see the commander. And he said, when he got in there, he said, "I want to tell you," he said, "you killed my son about 2 nights ago." And he said, "I don't blame you. It wasn't your fault." He was there because the VC came in and took him and said, "If you don't function with us, we'll kill your father." And he said, "He's dead now. They can't hurt me. And I'm going to tell you that this guy's a VC, this guy's a VC, this guy's a VC." And he went through and pointed out all of the enemy. And I thought, here's a guy that had every reason to be mad at us and wasn't, that understood what was going on. The people back home are protesting and burning flags, and that's why I don't have anything to do with reporters anymore. Yeah, I mean, and I thought that was for a little old man to come in and say, "You killed my son," and I don't hold it against you. He was doing what he didn't want to do, and you're doing what you don't want to do. But yeah, and there were all kinds of things that went on like that. But a little girl was brought into our hospital, our evac hospital. And she was maybe 12, 13 years old, and her father was the Dai of the area. Dai was he was usually a captain in the Vietnamese army, but he functioned as a mayor of an area. Anyway, and that was his big thing, the mayor. Anyway, they were collecting taxes and paying taxes to the central government like they were supposed to. But the VC came in and said, "You're going to pay taxes to us," and he had refused to do it. So one night they came in. Everybody's in bed in this village. They came in, went into his house, and tied he and his wife to the Vietnamese houses. Quite often had very large poles set in the ground in the middle of the house, which supported the roof and everything. And these things. But anyway, they tied both of them to poles, and then proceeded to rape his daughter. And then when they got through with her, they used their rifles, butts of their rifles, to crush her legs. And I suspect I don't know, but I think it was reported they made some disparaging remarks about what, she ended up losing both her legs, because of what they had done to her, and it was simply because her father was who he was. And yeah, it's just the American people, I don't think, understood, you know, what was going on, and yeah, how we treated the people and how the VC treated them. It was strictly an intimidation thing.
Right.
And yeah, there was down in the Delta. We went into the town we were in. It was the town of Rock Inn was the name of it. And when we went in there, why, the day after Christmas, and there wasn't anybody else. We were it. And like I said, artillery couldn't reach you. Nobody could reach you. Anyway, there was one old guy there, lost one eye, crippled one arm and a leg, and he'd gotten it as a member of the Viet Minh fighting the French. Apparently had lived in this little village for a long time. Well, the village had kind of a main street, and down the middle of it was it was a marketplace. It was a market town. And he said, yeah, he said the VC came in here a couple of years ago and took over. And he said, when they came in, why, they got all the people in this little town into the marketplace. And they said, wanted to know who was in charge. So the mayor said, well, I'm in charge. So they said they just took him over and put him against the wall and shot him.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, now who's in charge? Well, they didn't learn fast enough, and the guy, the vice mayor, raised his hand and said, well, you shot the mayor, so I guess I'm in charge, and grabbed him, sucked him against the wall and shot him. And said, now who's in charge? Third guy had learned his lesson and said, you are. And everybody left town and moved to Saigon and came back down. They came back down in the spring to plant their rice, came back in the fall to harvest it. And but the rest of the time, the town was deserted.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's how they governed. That's how they intimidated people. And but yeah, so yeah, I like a lot of people, I think, had a very bad taste in our mouth when we got back.
Yeah.
So. Jane Fonda's now one of my favorite actresses.
My father-in-law's the same way.
Yeah.
Moving on here. So, little lighter question, I guess. So, what was the food like while you were over there?
A sea rations, a sea rations, a sea rations. Actually, if you got back to base camp for a while, why, the food was fine. I mean, it was not the best, but everything's relative.
Yeah.
If it wasn't sea rations, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Did you always have plenty of supplies while you were there?
Yeah, I don't think we didn't demand much. Like I said, I was in an infantry unit, and we didn't spend that much time in base camp. Most of the time, we were out somewhere, and if we weren't out on a larger operation, then you were providing local security outside the, we went outside the perimeter on patrols and that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I lost a lot of weight, which I need to do again. but I was probably my healthiest when I came back. I probably lost about 20 pounds. But I learned some very big lessons how to do it.
Yeah.
Well, because what you did is if you're going to go, say, going to be out for, say, 2 days before you were resupplied, why, they gave you that number of rations, and you couldn't carry all of them, because they all came in little cans. So what you did is you dumped them out, sorted through it, took out what, and stuck them in a sock. It was, you tied to your belt, so you figure how much you can get in a boot sock. Okay. Well, there was no time to stop. We didn't stop and eat meals. What you did is you walked along, and we'd stop for whatever reason. So you grab grab your sock, pull something out of it, and eat. And the upshot of it was that all day you were never really hungry.
Yeah.
But you never ate that much, and you got a lot of exercise. And so I was very healthy,
Yeah.
but I lost weight. And that's the lesson I learned, is that you're better off eating about 4 or 5 meals a day than you are 2 big ones or 3 big ones.
Yeah. I think there's some truth to that.
So I guess there's a bright side.
Did you have anything that you took with you or you carried around for good luck?
No, don't believe in it. No, that's I don't believe. I'm not superstitious,
Okay.
nor do I believe in it. No.
And if there were times where you guys, for entertainment or anything, how did you entertain yourself while you were over there?
Drinking?
Drinking.
No, because there was beer, and that was about it. No, I mean, I don't know. There really wasn't that much time for entertainment. We did have a TV, that in the evening you could pick up a fuzzy picture from Saigon. The radio, the FM station, Good Morning Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was. I don't remember him, but
Right.
But yeah, that was about the best entertainment that you had. Plenty of books. Everybody sent you paperback books. So if you were a reader, why, you plenty of books to read. Actually, you didn't have that much time for entertainment. I did see one show that came over.
Oh.
Yeah, Jonathan Winters and Roy Clark were there. Now, before Roy Clark was famous, but I got to tell you, he was the most entertaining.
Was he?
Yes. Yeah, and Bob Hope came over. Was there while we were down the Delta, and we draw straws, a lottery. Two guys out of the company got to go, and of course, the officers weren't eligible. I got to fly them back to the base camp to see Bob Hope. But other than that, why? Once in a while there'd be somebody, some troop would come through, but we usually weren't there.
Yeah. So what did you do when you were on leave? Did you have leave, or were you?
R&R.
Yeah.
Yeah, I managed to get just about a month or so before I came back, before I rotated by. I did manage to take an R&R. I went to Japan.
Oh.
Yeah, and just went to Japan and enjoyed myself. Yeah, yeah, and.
Yeah.
But I don't. That would be one episode that I would not want to get into.
Yeah, it's fine. And you don't have to. I know you said you were in Germany. You were at Fort
Leonard Wood.
Fort Leonard Wood, and that's Missouri, right?
Yeah.
And did you travel anywhere else while you were in the service? I mean, other than those two, and obviously Vietnam. And
well, no. Well, yeah. Obviously, went to Europe several times after. For exercises, and throughout the states, I've been on the biggest part of the military post around here. But no, once I got off active duty, I was on active duty a little over 5 years, 5 years, 3 months, and 9 days to be exact. 19 days, excuse me. As if I were counting. But no, yeah, it was. No, I did travel in Europe. I did get to take a leave over there, and went down to Munich, and I would recommend it. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and to Vienna. Unfortunately, I had to go in the summertime, and actually nothing happens in the summertime. The Liftstoner horses are gone. and the symphonies are not playing, and all that sort of thing. So.
Do you recall any particular humorous or unusual events that happened during your time?
I wouldn't call it humorous for the people.
Unusual is also.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, it goes back to Vietnam. Like I said, in an infantry unit, we manned the bunker lines at night, and I usually manned them with people who had been wounded and they're recovering, or whatever reason they couldn't go to the field. You had very few people that, and anyway, and there's one young troop, and he was, and I don't remember why he was back, but the battalion XO decided that they wanted to hold a guard mount. Ridiculous in the first place, because I guarantee you people went down to the bunker line with all the ammunition and everything they could carry, and they knew what their job was. But anyway, he insisted that that's what we had to do. So these 3 or 4 guys in my company were going to man our bunkers. Went down there to the battalion headquarters. Well, we had built a little bit of what you would call an officers club, and he was sitting on a little wooden sidewalk with his M16. For whatever reason, he put a magazine in his rifle, and in the process of doing that, the bolt goes forward, picks up a round. Beg your pardon? Oh, the bolt of his rifle went forward, picked up a round, and chambered it. And and the kid was relatively new, and he'd been thinking more about it. Well, anyway, and he reached up, took the magazine out to disarm the rifle. Forgot that it had picked up a round. Put it back in his pouch, sitting there, and on the officers club wall, what it was that just they were on stilts about so high, and then there was wooden panels, just boards nailed across there, and one of them had a knot, and he used that knot as an aiming point, just sitting there dry firing his rifle, he thought, and he aimed at that knot and pulled the trigger, and it went off. Well, sitting on the other side of that little board was brigade commander, who was getting ready to rotate back to the States, the battalion XO, and the battalion S3, 2 majors and a bird colonel. And he hit all 3 of them. He just about tore the thumb off of the brigade commander because he was sitting in such a way that it went past him, went into the leg of the XO, broke his leg, the femur, and hit the S3, broke his leg with 1 round.
I was expecting you to say you missed all that it scared everybody. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
I said, that's not really funny,
No,
but at the same time,
oh
you think,
goodness.
what are the odds that you could do that to all 3 people? And yeah. And a few days later, I was down at the hospital visiting the wounded, and walked into this ward, and there sat all 3 of them, or laid all 3 of them in bed. And I had been trying to avoid them.
Yeah. And do you have any photos with you or anything that you'd like to share or talk about? Or
No, I
sometimes
don't.
people bring the photos to the
Yeah, I
interviews. That's the
really-
reason we ask. So,
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I don't.
Did you keep a personal diary
No.
of your time over there?
No, didn't really have time for that sort of thing.
And I know you had asked if you recalled the day your service ended, and I know you know to the day when your service ended. But where were you again when your service ended? Did you say?
I was at Fort Leonard Wood
Okay.
when I got out. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then when you were done with service, what did you do in the days and weeks immediately afterwards?
I went home. I mean, I wasn't married. I went home and went back to school.
Okay. So we went back to school, and then what did you do after your time in the service then? Did you go back to work also, or?
Yeah, I went to work for Illinois Power, and retired from there eventually.
Okay.
Yeah, but when I went to work for Illinois Power, why, I had joined a reserve unit down in Marion, Illinois, and then when I came back up to Decatur, went to work for the power company, why, and I transferred to a unit in Decatur, and that was the S4, then what was it, the S4 logistics, and then the logistics officer, then the S3, then the XO, and then the battalion commander. And yeah, and the unit had, I had 4 units, Rockford, Freeport, Joliet, and Danville, 4 other companies under us. But yeah, and that's where I stayed until it was a case of I either got out or transferred to Chicago, which was not something I wanted to do. My son had already told me that I didn't care because I didn't spend any time with him. So, yeah.
So, did you make any close friends with your time in the service, and do you still maintain contact with anybody?
Yeah, a number of good friends, but I've only run into, had a chance to talk to one of them since. They're from Georgia, California, wherever. I mean, it just, and the one guy that was close, lived here, lived close by, was killed down the Delta, and so it's a guy I went through OCS with down at Fort Benning, and but yeah, he was killed just shortly after I came back, and never recovered. Rivers down the Delta are you don't realize how flat the Delta is. The first morning I spent down there, I went to bed and there was water in the rice paddies. Got up the next morning and they were dry. The tide, and the tide came in, why it would flood the rice paddies. When the tide went out, all these little streams that backed up in became roaring rivers, and he got caught crossing one of them and was shot in the process, and they never did recover him. So, because like I said, you crossed those rivers when the tide was going out, you crossed them at your peril. So, but yeah, I've not. I've only run across one guy that I really, yeah, there were a lot of people that I were good friends with over there. But I don't know. I just haven't.
And let's see. So, and it looks like you've joined. So you're part of the DAV, right? Are you?
Well, I'm part of the American Legion.
American, okay. Let's
yeah.
see what other. Is that the only veterans organization?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just joined it about 2 years ago. So.
And did your military experience influence your thinking about war or military in general?
Well, no, I can't say that it has. I don't encourage war, but it's a sort of thing that becomes inevitable at some time. I guess probably today, what concerns me the most, and it started, this attitude in this country started, I think, with Korea, and was really manifested in Vietnam. And I see it happening again now in a couple of wars we've got going right now, that we don't have the stomach to stay like we should. Korea, we invested an awful lot of life, treasure in that one, and I know what we did in Vietnam, and I know we were winning. One of my favorite T-shirts, I've never found one for myself, said, you know, the logo on it said, "We were winning when I left," and that's true. Never lost one. Never lost a fight. So yeah, I look at this thing. You know, if you're gonna get into it, you know, you do it with both feet. We live in probably the most prosperous, most powerful country in the world. Have been for a number of years, and we seem, I don't know, we do it for whatever we can't flex our muscle. And I don't suggest we go out and try and intimidate the world, but when you get into a fight, if it's just, then do it. Don't mess around. And that's what we did over there. I mean, I've read the North Vietnamese general, what's his name? You know, he defected after the war and moved to Paris. And his comment was in an interview was that he said, if you had kept it up, kept the bombing up one more day, twice, we would have quit. He said, but LBJ kept stopped the bombing for a while and see if they won't come to the table. He said, if you'd have kept going, because we had already decided if this goes one more day, we can't do it. We can't sustain this. And so that's why I say, you know, when you get in, war is a terrible thing, but when you get in it, you got to get in it with both feet. And if you got the biggest stick, then you better be prepared to use it, because I guarantee you the other guy is going to. And war is not a political thing. You know, and that you're out to seize territory. So I don't want to get on my soapbox about that sort of thing.
That's okay. I think that's all the questions I had. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, but I guess probably the only thing I'd say, I don't know how this came about or anything like that, but I do have to say I appreciate it. You know, it's just kind of nice that somebody, you know, somebody does take a look at it. Not that anybody, I don't think anybody that came over here with me today is looking for accolades in any way, shape, or form. But
it's
it is
nice
kind of
to,
nice.
yeah, it's nice to get this out there. I mean,
Yeah.
this is part of our history, so it's
yeah. You know, and I really wish somebody would take a real long, hard look at a couple of these wars. I really would. You know, and somebody who is willing to be objective about it and how we conduct them, because we're going down that same path. So, like I said, I'm going to get on my soapbox.
okay. Well, thanks for your time.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay, I need a